This is the Silver Wolf Howl. I am Angela, and today we are chatting to Felicity Guest from the Institute for Social Development and Justice. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to chatting to you.
So, give us an introduction to the Institute for Social Development and Justice and the Facebook page.
The Institute for Social Development and Justice was founded earlier this year out of a need to have an official vehicle to advocate under and to get funding to make our work sustainable. So I've been doing this for years, and Eugene and I met up last year and there was synergy. So we had been working together, and it was a natural progression to form the vehicle to be able to advocate and to make the movement and the work sustainable.
Okay, so who is Eugene and how does he fit into the picture?
Eugene Opperman is a family law practitioner of 20 odd years. Prior to that, he was a magistrate and a prosecutor. So he brings the legal experience as well as 20 years of seeing victims' experiences. Yes, I think he started wanting to make a difference, contribute in a different way. So he made contact with me, and we got together and started doing workshops together. So I bring the lived experience expertise, and he brings the legal experience. So yeah, it works pretty well.
So would you share with us about what drove you to start this movement?
So I got divorced the first time in probably 1990. I had 2 daughters. And when I was sitting in court, the judge said to my attorney, "Have you advised your client that she can claim R1? Because I see she has not claimed maintenance, so sometime in the future she will be able to claim maintenance." And my advocate said, "My client is not interested. She does not want maintenance." Back then, a maintenance agreement didn't have to be part of a divorce, because I had decided I was not going to spend the rest of my life in a maintenance court, because I knew that he would not contribute. Just because of his behavior, not that he wouldn't have had the means. And then I got married, and I had another 3 children, and my one son is neurodiverse. So he's 29 today, but he is a dependent for the rest of his life. In 2010, I asked for a divorce. And he was in Johannesburg. He just was spending more time in Johannesburg. So I think after like 2 months, I said, the marriage is over. And he then came to Cape Town, and we spoke about the divorce, and it was quite amicable. And then 3 weeks later, he sent me a divorce agreement and said, "If you sign this, in 3 weeks you can be divorced." And I'm going, "I'm hoping that you've had amnesia, because this is not what we actually discussed. And that this is not intentional." I then thought, no, I better go and see an attorney, because otherwise I'm going to be defending out of Johannesburg. So I went to Yellow Pages, the first attorney that could actually see me. That's who I went to. And he wrote my divorce papers. And while I was still trying to serve documents, so we probably tried to serve the middle of February. And then I think it was the 26th of March, I opened up my emails and I had a divorce decree emailed to me from him. So I obviously realized that there was something amiss, because I had not participated in the process. The next day, I only got the decree. I didn't get the supporting papers, but I phoned the courts, and they drew the file, Pretoria High Court, and I just said, "How much maintenance is there?" And he said, "There are no children." So I said, "Thank you. How do I get a copy of the documents?" An article clerk, an attorney was doing the articles. She said, "I'll get you a copy," because I'm at the court all the time. She managed to get a copy on the Monday and emailed it to us. And then put my file into safekeeping, because she said this file is going to go missing. So obviously my lawyer said, these are your options, gave me the various options, remedial action for myself, and also, what to do with the fact that he divorced me fraudulently. So my intention wasn't to go the legal route initially, in terms of holding him accountable, but his behavior, like eventually, he would do things, and one day it was just one of those things, and I said, you know what, actually, now I'm going to go lay criminal charges. So I flew up to Pretoria to go lay criminal charges, and I was literally 2 hours after 2 hours in Pretoria Central Police Station, they threw me out. And they said, it's not a criminal charge, it's a civil charge. And I then went off to the High Court, because I thought, well, actually, I'll go and see the judge. Because as a layperson, I could see the discrepancies. The dates didn't match, the signatures. Anyway, so I went off, and the judge wasn't there. He was an acting judge at the time. And I then said, well, I want somebody to help me. And he said, no, sorry, we can't help you. So I said, okay, well then I'm going to chain myself to your building. I think it might have been the Oscar Pistorius trial at the time. It was a big trial at the court as well, so there was a lot of media presence. I said, I'm actually going to go and get chains, and I will chain myself to the building outside until somebody here helps me, because this is where the issue started. And I'm unable to have any recourse, and I'm being frustrated. So I'm being denied access to justice. Anyway, he then sent me to the registrar. I think she was the assistant registrar. So what I appreciated is she phoned the police station, and she phoned like various levels, and she said, you've been trained on this. Why are you turning applicants away? This is not your call. You take a statement, and then it's for the prosecutors to decide. So anyway, she said, you know what? Actually, go and see the Deputy Judge President. So she sent me up to the Deputy Judge President, and his secretary asked me where my file was. I said, hang on, let me phone the attorney. And she said, it's in the Deputy Judge President's safe. So you can just see how things kind of work out. And funny enough, her surname was Nightingale. So I ended up seeing the Deputy Judge President, and he said to me, it's a syndicate that's operating out of the Pretoria court. They were aware of it. Minimum of 5 divorces like that going through their courts. So I said, well, what are you doing about it? And he said, we'll be waiting for somebody to open a charge, a complaint. I said, well, how are we supposed to do that when I've just been thrown out of the police station? And then we had a bit of a discussion, and I said to him, why am I the only woman that is so disgruntled that I've ended up here and nobody else? And he said, women are scared, they don't have the money, potentially putting the father of their children in jails, and that's why. And, I literally felt something change inside me. And I said to him, I don't know how, but I will become that voice, because just because we are women, it does not mean that we do not have a right to justice. Yeah, and on that, I left. I arrived in Pretoria at 8 o'clock that morning. I left at 6 o'clock that night. So, it just goes to show. And I phoned my attorney, who I'd phoned early in the day from the police station. He said, I told you justice is messed up. Get on a plane, come back to Cape Town. You're wasting your time. There's so much corruption. And I said, I'm not done. I'll phone you later. That's when I went to the Pretoria court. So at 6 o'clock when I left, I phoned him and I said, guess what? I have a case number. He said, how the hell did you do that? Well, when I told him, he just burst out laughing. He said, yeah, okay. And I was very fortunate in that I think that when it took that turn, he kind of took me on as a pro bono client without telling me. I would not have got through that without the support. I didn't know that. I don't even know if it was a decision at that stage, but something shifted. But the way that he supported me, just in terms of being available to me, supporting me and encouraging me, without ever talking about money. And then eventually, so I then applied to have that divorce set aside, because I was the only other person who had a copy of the documents. After I saw the Deputy Judge President, my file went back into the system and it disappeared, like they all do. So without that evidence, it's difficult to lay a charge. So obviously they weren't anticipating me getting a copy of the supporting documents. So I then applied to have his divorce set aside, try to serve those documents and my divorce. And now this is July. I've been trying since the middle of February to serve documents on him. And the sheriff phoned me. I'll never forget, we were on first name terms by then. And he said, I just had a phone call to say that he doesn't live at that address and that they don't know where he lives, and it was an anonymous call. I said, yeah, well, anticipated that. The next morning I jumped on a plane again, and this must have been, I don't know, the 8th time that I'd spontaneously got on the plane. And I arrived at his work. The very address that the sheriff had tried to serve several times. And it was quite interesting because he was on the first floor. It was the first time I'd been there. But what I had established is him and his new fiancée actually worked together. So I realized that there was gatekeeping. So when I arrived, I went, hi, I'm here to see. And she goes, who are you? No, I'm an old friend. I just was in the area and I thought I'd pop in and say hi. But I was walking up the stairs and I'm messaging my attorney and I'm going, listen, if I go missing, this is where I am. And he's going, what the hell are you doing in Johannesburg again? So now, well, I thought I'd help the sheriff serve the papers. And at that point, my ex looked up and he saw me at the top of the stairs. And I remember I was shaking. I could feel like the perspiration. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. And all of these people are going, who's this woman like visiting him? Is she another woman? Nobody, I don't think anybody really knew who I was. And he just ushered me into the office and closed the door. And he goes, what are you doing here? Okay, surprised you asked, actually. When I divorced, wasn't quite regular. We got children and we need to sort this out. I downplayed it. And you haven't signed my papers. You haven't signed to receive my papers yet. And we need to get this finished, So I said, yeah, okay, I'll get hold of the sheriff. I said, when? He said, sometimes. I picked up the phone and I phoned the sheriff. First name turns, hi Andre, how are you? Guess where I am? I'm sitting right opposite him. How are we going to conclude the service of papers? I said, can you meet him at a restaurant perhaps around the corner from his house? And he goes, yes. Because I figured out that his fiancée obviously didn't know about this and he didn't want the documents at the house. So I kind of figured that out. So he said, sure. I said, what time? And so I said to him, where can he meet you? And he gave me the name of a restaurant. I said, can you meet him there at 5:30? He said, yes. At 5:45, the sheriff phoned me and he said, he came, he arrived and he signed both papers. Because I told him I will not leave Johannesburg until he signed the papers. Simple. Then that divorce was set aside on the 3rd of August of 2011. Then he refused to sign my papers. So you can see I didn't have children. I would have to phone him and beg him for money. Please, can I have money? And he'd go, no, I don't have. Oh no, you've been a bad mother. Oh no, you're irritating me. Oh, when I've got money. So it was, I had 4 my kids living with me. Although I'd started a little part-time business, it wasn't enough for me to sustain my kids. I've been a stay-at-home mother. And my one child is a neurodiverse child. He's on the autistic spectrum. He's come to work with me every day to go and see clients. So you can see the impact. But it was me having to beg him for money. And I noticed how he was punishing me through money. And not having a maintenance agreement. I didn't have a Rule 53 or Rule 43 or Rule 58. I was just going through this. Anyway, he wanted me to sign a confidentiality clause in my divorce, and that is the only thing that was holding the divorce up. So eventually he realized that it was a losing battle because I had taken it to 702. Mandy Wiener actually broke it, but I stayed anonymous because I didn't want him to know what I was doing to whatever recourse. So yeah, we kept it confidential, but she released the story. And I think he realized that I wasn't going to shut up, that I will use the media. Eventually he conceded and he signed my divorce, and I went, okay, great, I have a maintenance order. Now I can enforce it in the maintenance. I don't know why I thought that, because it's not what I thought in 1990. And yeah, well, the rest is history, we all know. I went to the maintenance court, couldn't get help, trying to serve documents. I was always serving documents. At one stage I got a pilot from SAA to go and take it to Joburg. I had friends in Joburg who picked it up and took it to SAPS to go and have it served. The story, and he goes, no, this is impossible. This is ridiculous. He did what to you? I'll give you some help as well. And that didn't really make much difference in court. So, I became aware of all of these subtleties that impact on children getting child support. But it's the abuse, the barriers, and I had an attorney and an advocate. Anyway, the one night after court, again, another disappointing day in court, I came home and I said, what are other women doing? Like, this is ridiculous. And I started a Facebook group called Child Maintenance Difficulties in South Africa. It was like, we grew, I think the first year I had 700 members. The next year I think I gained 1,500. I just put it out there. I mean, I didn't actively go out and promote it. And I mean, today I've got over 78,000 people. And that we know is the tip of the iceberg. Many have come and gone. That's what's currently on. And Eugene himself has a Facebook group that he started after mine. And I think he's got close to 50,000. So if you just look at, combined our two groups, and we're really just a tip of the ocean. How systemic this problem is. And running this group for 8 years, I mean, watching the patterns going, oh, it wasn't just me. So similar. What happens, and then what happens in court. And it doesn't matter where in the country, it doesn't matter which maintenance court, all the same. So then you start inquiring, okay, hang on, where does this? I mean, what's the cause of that? What is training? What do they care? What is the political commitment to this? What is the social commitment to this? So I just started doing a lot of research. And in 2018, I put all my stuff into storage and I surrendered and said, okay, God, just take me and use me where you need to use me. I will do this full time. And I was lying in bed one night. I went, oh my gosh, I remember like after when I first entered this, and I said, God, you know what, I need to offer a service. I want a building. I want a building where people can come in and get social cycle support, legal representation, guidance, a cup of coffee, somewhere that they feel held and loved. That's what I want. And I was lying in bed this one night and I went like, oh my gosh, he's given it to me, but in cyber world. And he knew better, because if I had a building in Weinberg, for example, how I would have been very limited in my reach and the impact. So in cyber worlds, Facebook, I had a much bigger impact and was able to empower and assist a whole lot of people.
So you have been doing what you do for the past several years, free of charge, I assume. So tell us about the difficulties around that and the support, like I asked you before. Do you get support when you put it out there? Is it difficult? Tell us a little more about that.
So I did co-found the NPO before, and it was primarily people from my group. I thought that we all had a mutual commitment to wanting, and I think we did at the time, to be absolutely honest. I think we all came into it with pure intentions. But I grew, and I don't believe they grew in the direction and at the same speed that I grew, because the one of the co-founders was developing an issue with my advocacy, and I said, but these people don't sit on our Facebook group and change is not going to happen. We're only impacting on so many people. We have to take it beyond the group, and advocacy is a critical part of it. I think I've always been a feminist and believed in feminist justice. But I started using the language because we can't deny the inequality that women experience. And myself being a white person, I becoming aware, and I've been schooled, I've been wrapped over the knuckles with this. I arrived with good intentions, wanting to do it, but from my own lived experience and my own perspective, through my lens as a privileged white woman. And in order to represent people, or even just like on my group, I had to deconstruct, like make a conscious effort to deconstruct my inherent racism, so that I could understand other people's lived experience if I was to speak on behalf of them. And there were some of these issues that were coming up, because when I challenged particularly people close to me's inherent racism, they pushed back and they didn't like it. And then I was accused of being, becoming a feminazi. And this was like such a patriarchal, toxic, masculine response to, and I'm going, if you, particularly you, are like core to this. We are not aligned because how do we represent? We can't. Eventually, we dissolved that MPO, and I thought, you know what, I'll carry on doing it on my own. Also, it was to get funding, but you know, it was, as I say, I just believe that we all came together with good intentions, and we grew differently, and I think it was the right decision to part ways. And then I did it on my own, and then obviously getting funding would have become a problem because I was an individual, and I thought, you know, I don't care. I've moved 14 times in 4 years because I literally couch surfed, lived for short periods where people could accommodate me. I did supervised visits for a mother for 6 months in exchange for accommodation. And I mean, I'm a grown woman, you know. But that was my commitment in order to trust that it would happen, and that all I needed to do was just keep showing up. But in that, my whole value system changed as well. You know, realizing what is important. My material stuff, my stuff is still in storage. The other day I went to storage and go, oh my gosh, look at these clothes. I haven't seen them for 4 years. Yay, I got some work clothes. You know, I've survived, and in fact I've thrived. I say to people, I look younger now than what I did 11 years ago, and I've just turned 60. But then I probably looked 63. Today people go, are you really 60? And that's because I'm thriving, in spite of not having a fixed income, in spite of the insecurity. I'm able to do it. Not everybody can do this. I can do this because my kids are adults. And if I don't do it, who would have done it? I mean, this has been going forever. My mother went through this. When would this have changed? We see how normalized. Who was going to be the person that could take the risks? Because there's so much risks. There's the gagging. Most women who go to the media get gagged. They get slapped with interdicts immediately. So who would have been this voice? My exes laid charges against me for defamation of character and all sorts of things. It takes a lot of courage to do this. And I mean, we have to acknowledge this, because this is why women don't speak up. I mean, not just women, but vulnerable people. You speak up against giants. You speak truth to power and you get shut up. And he who has the money controls you. He who has money has access to justice. So anyway, so from time to time I've really relied on charity. There's times that I have gone hungry, you know, where I've eaten minimal, really stretched my meal conveniently, or found someone and said, listen, I don't have anything to eat, can I pop in for a meal? But I've been vulnerable. And I grew up in a domestic abusive home, and you operate out of survival, and like you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I've had to allow myself to be vulnerable, like get out of survival mood and be vulnerable so that people could support me properly. And also, in that, I've been attacked and don't get a proper job. Like, why are you living with charity? And go, your opinion actually doesn't matter. I'm doing this. I know why I'm doing this. You don't want to support, don't support me. There are others who do, who understand that this work has to be done. So a lot of growth and shifting. I really don't like using the word resilience too often, because we glamorize suffering under resilience. But resilience does build strength and courage, and that it's being built in me, but in a healthier way, not so much out of survival. And then Advocate Mohammed Abroaf actually said to me, you need to charge for your services. Like, why are you giving everything away? The Facebook group is one thing. And he actually encouraged me to charge for private coaching sessions based on my lived experience. And he offered it through his legal practice, so through his website. And that kind of, you know, we also come into this when you're going through all of this, and there's a bit of imposter syndrome. And women, it's like, carry a lot of imposter syndrome. Women of colour going into the workplace, becoming leaders in communities. You know, it's like, do I really belong here? I don't have this. I'm not competent in comparison. And just him validating me gave me the confidence to actually do that. Not because I doubted what value I could add, but what are the legal practitioners? Like, who else does coaching? You know, I'm not offering legal advice. I'm sharing my lived experience. But I'm mindful, I'm not a lawyer, and I would never portray myself as a lawyer. I've done a mediation course. I don't think there are many people who know the Maintenance Act better than I do in this country, or the maintenance courts better than I do. So now I do charge, and it's unpredictable, it's unstable, it's not sustainable, but you can't do it if you don't have. It's not I'm saying, based on my own experience, I've taken one for the team. We have to be discerning. We can do it, but we can't do it for nothing. Yeah, and that's where we said, okay, how are we going to do this? And then we formed the NPC so that we can get funding, because a great part of our work and our hearts is to take it to grassroots level. So what does that look like in this country? We've done a lot of work around here. I've done some work in Johannesburg. I've done workshops around the country, Joburg, but we need to take it to grassroots. We need to take it to rural women. And what does that look like? We need to employ people that represent them, that speak their language, that understand the culture, that understand the trauma, that can do it in their own languages. Yeah. And that costs money. But that's our mission, that's my goal, to get funding to be able to take this to grassroots. Because it's not just maintenance, it's how many women live who are being economically abused and oppressed, and they don't realize it's a form of domestic violence because it's so normalized by culture, by religion, by society.
Okay, so what do you see as the single greatest obstacle in South Africa to primary caregiver parents getting what they need in terms of maintenance?
I'm going to say political will, and I know that's so what does that mean? Look what happened during the virus pandemic. It was political will to appoint committees, task teams, funds very quickly. That's political will. Why are the maintenance courts dysfunctional? It's political will, because how many other provisions in the Act are there but never implemented? So nothing, there's no provisions. It's all been passed. The legislation's, but nothing beyond that. So, can you imagine, one, the unions, the ANC didn't think about their female members. How many females have been blacklisted since 2018 because they don't get child support? Yeah. Not a single man has been blacklisted. 50% of women are not getting child support. Does that not speak directly to inequality and keeping women oppressed? You cannot tell me I'm the only one who knows this. They know this. If this became a political thing, they should be speaking about this now, in the build-up to elections. If somebody wanted to be president in this country, I'm telling you, represent women. Speak to women. They're the majority of the voters. Speak to the heart of their struggles, and that is economic inequality. Most of it is around child support. They would get voters, but who would they alienate? It's a political risk. Look at the GBV NSP. There's political will. In response to total shutdown, steering committee in the president's office. I go, hang on, wonder if they can include economic abuse. This is 2019. So I email the president again. I've got a different email address, somebody in his office. Emailed this person, and I said, I'm concerned. The steering committee is working with the response to the demand to implement change. How is economic abuse and financial abuse being considered in the crisis of gender-based violence? Dr. Olive Sasana, who headed up that committee, I sent it at midnight on the Sunday. She phoned me 8:45 the next morning. She said, can you please make submissions? I can't, we don't have time for a whole engagement. Just send me your draft because we have to submit. And she said to me, we would probably need you to come up and train the steering committee. This was in 2019. They included in their definition of gender-based violence in the NSP to include maintenance specifically being used as a tool to cause harm. Recognized. It's under Pillar 3 in terms of justice, but very seldom discussed because, there's so much, we've had to get amendments for so much legislation. Pillar 5, which is the economic pillar, there's somebody who was tasked to develop a new framework. But the Law Reform Commission now has been working on amendments, and they're not talking to each other. And I'm going, okay, so again, like rape, shelters, all the other aspects of gender-based violence are on the table, on the main table. Not one of them have ever reached out to me since 2019 you can't but help but think, why? Is this deliberate? So we talk about economic empowerment, we talk about creating jobs and entrepreneurs and prioritizing service providers being women-owned. But how are they being economically empowered if they're still financially raising children on their own?
We realize that a vast majority of sufferers of financial abuse are mothers, but you come across single fathers out there who are suffering from the same abuse from their female ex-partners, and are their feelings and reactions the same as the mothers?
So that's very interesting. 84% of the people in my group are mothers, 16% are men, and that's also some who don't want to pay, and quite a few who are primary caregivers that don't get. So one, I'm going to say they experience bias in the courts, again because of the way we're socialized, because they go, hang on, you're a man, like where do men ask women for money? You have primary care, why have you got primary care? Just be grateful and just pay. And they don't hold women accountable. I had a guy in Paul, I think, an African man, primary caregiver of 3 children. They refused to help him because I'm going, you're a man. And she earned more than him. And he said, what do I do? I'm going, they're prejudicing you because of the socialization. You keep going back and you do X, Y, Z. So, interesting, somebody was being interviewed by the Department of Justice, and they said magistrates, maintenance officers are human beings who come with their own bias. And sometimes we see it in the court, and we see this. Men don't cry. We see men not reporting physical abuse because they made a joke of in the police station. Look how big you are. How big is she? And you coming here to tell her she beat you up? Go home. Like you're wasting our time. I mean, there are many victims. Men are raped. Do they go and report rape? No, because men are supposed to be perpetrators. Yes, it's men raping men, but men are victims. So it's the way that we are socialized by both men and women, but particularly that's toxic masculinity. That's the toxin of patriarchy that harms men equally. The difference is men are inherently economically privileged. So they earn more, they can afford to pay for au pairs or extra help, or their mothers, their families, whatever they come and help. They can continue with their careers. They're not as involved in the care work if they're primary caregivers. So from an economic point of view, yes, it would help them. They, more often than not, they can still continue accumulating assets, even if they are primary caregivers. Women do not have that same opportunity. So that's the difference. While we recognize it happens, it's not right. Women should be held accountable. It's a child's right to get financial support. But we can't say that as a binary, statement, because we have to be aware that inherently women are economically disadvantaged. So men get praised for being primary caregivers. Hurrah, clap, clap. Oh, he's such a great dad. Look, he's at the park with the kids, taking the kids for a walk on a pram. Oh, he's at the doctor with the kids. Like, geez, what an amazing dad. Hell no. Why are we celebrating parents doing what parents should be doing? Do women get celebrated and high-fived and acknowledged for the care work? No, we don't. So we have to understand these inequalities. And then there is, one is the means to be able to do it. Some go and rebuild your life. Just give me my kids. But we're also seeing a pattern that has come over from America, very dominant in America, where the cycle of abuse is they will do the money. So they will withhold child support, and then they go, I'm not quite having the desired effect because you've just gone, okay, I'll just carry on. I'm going to take my children, I'm going to take the children away because that I know is going to really hurt you. And then they go for primary care. Or they haven't really been present, they go for primary care 50-50 because they think they don't have to contribute because there's a perception that if you have 50-50 you don't pay maintenance. You still do because they still do the economic balance to see if there's inequity, and they might still have to contribute, but there's this perception. As soon as they've got 50-50, then they don't participate in 50-50 co-parenting. So it's just, and it's not everybody, but I can recognize this, I can almost predict, like when somebody tells me a story, I can almost predict what the next move is going to be based on their past behavior, because that's abuse. They will just find a different tool to use. Money is a tool, children are a tool. We have to focus more on behavior, a pattern of behavior. That's what we need to really concentrate on.
So you have spoken a bit about the challenges and the problems in the court systems and how it's a challenge for parents. How can these problems be fixed, both short term and long term, in your opinion?
I think one is there seems to be a continuous acknowledgement that there are systemic failures. Okay. Well, how long are you going to say this for before you actually realize or take, establish what they are and make a commitment to change them? We cannot keep hearing there are no resources. Find the resources. Or utilize your resources better. If you can't do it, call people like us in. Let us show you. But the DOJ particularly is so possessive and protective. And they do it under the umbrella of these are legal documents and not everybody can have access to. They've got so many gatekeepers. And that prevents us. But I believe that within the current resources, if they changed their thinking, if they became trauma informed, if they became domestic violence informed, they would behave differently. One, they would not view a folder as a manila folder full of papers of different thicknesses and just get it out of my way. If they looked at that folder as a child who is in need and consider the child's rights and the impact on its mother, and the majority who are women, they would do it differently. If they were conscious and said, if I postpone this case, this child could starve, this mother could commit suicide, or considering killing her children because she can no longer provide for them. If they thought like that before they postponed, they would respond differently. And our laws are there. The laws we have are adequate. They have to change because they are gender neutral without taking into account the gendered impacts. And that's our problem. They do not consider the gendered impacts. So they massage their figures, all to fit their narrative. That's what I'm saying, it's political. You cannot tell me as a minister that you release stats going 13 cases a month go through Cape Town Magistrates Court. We have over 1 million children born a year. 60% do not have fathers on their birth certificates, which matches the stats of 50% don't get child support and the red tape if you put them on. So you kind of get an idea. You can look at 50%. Okay? So 1 million births, you must have at least 500,000 applications. That particular year, they said no, only 146 nationally, only 146 applications. I'm going, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I can do simple maths and go, hang on, births, these don't match. But they give, so who's interrogating them? Who's doing these audits on their figures? Us in the sector can work out that it's a lie. So where does this? To make them look good. How do they then motivate for staff? They're down to one maintenance officer. The demand has not decreased. In fact, the response to the demand has increased. There's one maintenance officer. How does he get to process everything? The files pile up. They've changed the whole thing. No specialist prosecutor, no specialist maintenance. Magistrate. So you have a magistrate who comes in, particularly in the smaller courts, who's just done a criminal case, who's just done a hijacking, who's just done an abduction, human trafficking case, and then they come and sit and they listen to a main day. Where are their expertise? They're not being trained. Justice College, when last was it functional? They're undercapacitated. They're not getting proper training. Where's all the money going? Political.
So it's basically the whole system that needs a makeover.
I sat on the summit last night coming out of Canada. One, they had a member of parliament who spoke. She closed it. The second speaker is an ex-member of parliament. On one summit, 2 members of parliament. I'm trying to get endorsement for our campaign. We have international, we're launching it with international partners. I sent it to the DOJ, to Mr. Crispin Perry, twice, 2 emails, no response, and all I'm asking for them is to endorse the campaign. It's part of domestic violence, it's in our act. To women and children and people living with disabilities, as well as to the GBV NSP. All I'm asking for them is to endorse and give us permission to use their logo on a campaign. Is that a lot to ask for? I've sent them 2 emails, not a single response. We're not represented on the GBV NSP, in spite of everything. They don't talk about it. The opening statement now at the summit in Johannesburg. Dr. Olive Sasana, she gave the opening address. When she was listing the forms of abuse, she did not list economic abuse. So you can see, what do we need to do? It is the most pervasive, insidious, harmful, violent form of domestic violence. The core, one of the major cogs. But let's build more shelters. Let's just talk to SAPS about, let's build more Tutuzela centres. No transitional housing. No, let's acknowledge this. Let's enforce maintenance. Maintenance is the quickest way to bring about some kind of financial stability for victims. Because without that, how do they provide food security, shelter security? How do they go and develop skills? More women drop out of school than men. Why? Because of poverty, affordability. So that's where you start seeing the disadvantage. And now, they have babies. It's their right. It's their constitutional right. The women on the periphery are not getting educated. They're not empowered. We see that the more education, the more empowered, the better choices you make over your own sexual reproduction to break that cycle. But if you just like roaming around and, it's easier to fall into and stay trapped in the cycle. But start with enforcement. We've got the legislation, existing legislation, start with enforcement. Because then men will realize they need to take response. Then we can work on the social development and the social shift. Send men to jail. No, jails are too full. We don't want to criminalize it, shameful men. But let a woman go and steal a chicken in Checkers, but she's not getting child support and she can't feed her child, she gets thrown into jail and sits there. And what happens to the child? Does she tell them I don't get child support? Do they even ask? Petty crimes out of desperation. A whole lot of women wouldn't end up in jail if they had child support. Not for petty crimes. Just enforce maintenance. And then men will realize, there's consequences. There's no consequences. Is the system meant to work for us? We were not recognized as persons. We were objects owned by men. This whole system, does it benefit us? Are we seen as worthy humans? Or are we still objects to be disposed of and discarded? Our system doesn't work for us, irrespective of our liberal constitution. We are seen as used goods, just thrown away. Not just by ex-partners, but by the system. It doesn't work for us. They don't see us as persons with dignity and rights.
So we'll just end off with two things. What is your message you'd like to give to listeners in general? And also, what words of support do you have for someone who is started in this thing and doesn't know what to do next?
My message to society, and this includes men and women, is we cannot carry on the way that we are. We see the harm that is causing to us. And it's not going to change unless we have the hard conversations. And what are those conversations? It's like looking at the way that we are socialized. And this is, people don't realize they're being abused until they are so far down. And in that process, it's affected their mental, emotional self-worth. Finances have been coerced and controlled. The dependence, whether it's through becoming a mother or encouraging them not to take a promotion, creating the financial dependence, which is the barrier to women having agency to leave abusive situations, them and their children. If people don't have children, it's easier to close that chapter and move on. But if you have children, it's very difficult. Is that one, we need to have these conversations and we need to hold accountable. These are our brothers, our boyfriends, our best male friends, our husband's brother, our sister's brother. We all know these people that are behaving like this. That maintenance should stop being a grudge payment. We're building the next generation. We're perpetuating this trauma onto our children. And it's not just about money. We need to look deeper. It's the collective trauma, one of women, and the collective trauma of economic inequality. And if we don't enforce this, those two fundamentals are not going to change.
Felicity, thank you so much. This has been not only interesting, but so informative for me as a woman as well. I don't have children, so I haven't had these challenges to face. But as a woman, I could see different perspectives and things that also impact me. And I know Ryan has also been changed and informed in a different way. So thank you for taking the time to share all of this with us, to share your passion with us, and for having us here today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.